You are listening to Angel Insights, brought to you by SyndicateRoom. And joining us for this very special pre-Christmas show, I'm delighted to welcome Julian Ranger. Julian has been an angel investor since 2007 and an entrepreneur since he formed his first business, STASYS, 1986, which he sold to Lockheed Martin in 2005. Julian was responsible for the growth of STASYS to a 17 million plus business with 230 staff and subsidiaries in USA, Germany, Australia and Malaysia prior to the sale to Lockheed Martin. Julian then left Lockheed in June 2007 and has been an angel investor in many businesses, mainly technical in focus, including such successful businesses as Hailo, the taxi hailing app, Astrobotic and Datasift. If that wasn't enough, Julian also founded an innovation hub, iBundle, which has been responsible for a number of new businesses, and he is the current founder and chairman at Digime. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Julian Ranger, founder and chairman at Digime. Well, Julian, welcome to Angel Insights. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
A pleasure. Nice to see you.
Now, can you start us off by giving us a little background about you and tell us how you made your entry into the tech and investing world?
Yes, originally I was an aeronautical engineer way back in the early 80s, and I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time that I got involved in the very beginnings of what became the military internet. And so I was a world expert by the tender age of 23. So looking upwards, it was sort of dead men's shoes. So I decided to leave and form my own company, which was perhaps a little daft in 86, thinking I was going to be a military systems consultant. But it worked. Basically, I saw very early on that when you bring lots of different platforms together on different communications networks with different languages and requirements, it all ends up a bit of a mess. And I was able to invent some processes and procedures and stuff that became known as iSmart, which became part of the world's military, and it's embedded in the system. So I ended up with offices around the world, sold my business eventually in 2005 to Lockheed Martin, worked for them for a few years and retired as their VP of International Strategy, which I have to say was a lovely job. And thought, well, what do you do next? And so for a few years, sort of dabbled in some early investing and then did angel investing much more seriously, which I've done up until recently. I had a small innovation hub I created, but I ended up with a new idea myself. And so now I'm doing that full time. But still have a large portfolio of my investments, which I do, and I shall come back to it as soon as time allows for my current business.
So then, honing in on the start of your angel investing career, what was it that really enticed you to enter the industry? Was it the value add you could provide? Was it working with entrepreneurs and startups? Was it the potential returns? What was it for you?
I think it was a bit more prosaic than any of those things, actually. It was a way of getting involved in something. I've always enjoyed technology, and most of my investments have been technology focused. So I think it was a natural outgrowth of my curiosity of what was happening, seeing companies and then being able to invest in them. And of course, yes, I was able to give some of my time and some of my knowledge to help them. But I think that's where it really started. It was more a question of seeing what was out there and then being drawn in slowly.
And you mentioned there about the global operations that you built up from the beginning, really. So having spent those years in operation, how do you think that affected your investing style? And do you think having a past extensive career in operations is beneficial for angels?
Well, I think any experience of business certainly is going to help you. I was obviously an entrepreneurial business. And I learnt my business as I did it, as indeed do most entrepreneurs. In other words, I only spent 2 years in a big company before creating my own for 19 years. And you learn on the job. Now you get training. I'm a member of a thing called Vistage, which is the sort of group for chief exec, which I think has the last 14 years, which has been brilliant for my learning. Mm-hmm. Did it help with the angel investing? Almost certainly, yes, because of course I could give advice and I could see what people were doing. But I would say that if there's one thing that I would have changed was I sort of ploughed in with 2 feet on my own fairly quickly, and I should perhaps have taken I should have taken a more steady approach to angel investing, because like anything new, I may know business and I may know people and I know the technologies and stuff like that. But angel investing itself has various things that you need to look out for, various things you need to look for in business. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, had I sort of taken a slightly slow approach, done more with other groups, seen some things happening, I would have probably not made some of the mistakes I made in some of my early investment. But then there you are. That's also part of the entrepreneurial style. One tends to jump in and get on with it.
And you mentioned there the things that you need to look out for in angel investing. What do you think those are then in particular, say to a newcomer to the angel investing industry? What should they look out for?
The first is you actually have to understand, if you're going to go for the entrepreneurial type, and not all angel investing is entrepreneurial, of course. It can be growth, it can be in more steady industries than perhaps the tech side. But if you are going to invest in entrepreneurs, you certainly need to understand their mindset. Now, I did know that because that's kind of my mindset. But that means that not everything is going to be as formal. You've got to allow entrepreneurs to use their entrepreneurial spirit in the business and be happy with that and not constrain it. But the main things are, I always say there's 3 things, and this is nothing new. I think most angels would say this. It's the team, the idea, and the revenue plan. But I give percentages of the team's 50% of it, the revenue plan's 25%, and the idea is 25%. Now, actually, I remember talking to a lady fairly early on in my angel investing career who'd been doing it for 30-odd years. And I said this, that it's at least 50% team. And she told me, Julian, she said, I've been studying this for many, many, many years, and I will tell you that it's at least 90% team. So certainly it's team, the team revenue plan and whatever, and that really matters. But it's also about timing. I would say that some of my bigger mistakes have not been that the idea is wrong, the revenues plan's wrong, or even that the team is wrong. Some have been the team was not right. But it's been because it's been too early. That's not always a bad thing if you think or you're convinced that there is a sufficient life scale to the business that they can last until it no longer is too early. But several of the businesses I've invested in have crashed and burned primarily because it was a great idea, but it was just too early. The timing wasn't right.
And when you say it was too early, is that too early in terms of technological development or too early in the entrepreneur's life cycle? What was it in those cases predominantly?
Slightly too early sometimes technologically. Not the entrepreneurs, no. It's the market isn't ready for it sometimes. Mm-hmm. You come back at it a couple of years later and you suddenly see a very similar idea take off. And that's happened several times. And in fact, I think what made me feel slightly happier that I wasn't alone in making these sort of mistakes was when I saw a TED talk from Bill Goss, who does Idea Lab. Mm-hmm. And he said most of the ones he's been burned on were because he invested too early. Mm-hmm. So I felt slightly better at that point.
And we mentioned about value add and how you can contribute to your angel investments. So how heavily are you involved with your angel investments personally, and how involved do you like to be?
There's a range, really. So for some, I've been almost exclusively hands-off. For others, I've been a full non-exec director and everything in between. Mm-hmm. So I think it really depends upon what the business needs and what my skill set is to fit. So I've invested on my own sometimes with other angels and as part of an angel group here in Surrey. And so sometimes I'm investing in an area where I know very little, but other members of the group do. So in those situations, I'm pretty much quiescent, hands-off investor. In others, I am the expert, and I might go as far as being non-executive on the board, and some I've even been chairman. So I think it's a matter of saying, in reality, do you have something to add? So I don't interfere where I haven't got anything to add. But if I am able to add and I've got the time, then I will do so. Quite often, it's just being there for the entrepreneurs, the management team, when they want to. So quite a lot of my investments, I may not be actively involved, but I will get calls from time to time, and I'll go out of my way to respond to those, whether that's giving advice. Quite often, it's giving introductions. And I do think, having been both sides of this, both as an engineer, entrepreneur myself, and now again, and as an investor, I think in many, many times you can help your companies you're investing in by those contacts you can give. Mm-hmm. So, for example, my current company, Digime, I have a large number of very good angel investors in my business, and they are very often giving me introductions at the highest levels to companies we want to sell or to talk to, and that's invaluable. So it could be as small as just that introduction. It can be all the way up to being a non-exec, but it is always only if it's adding value.
And having made angel investments and then raising for Digime, how was the process raising for Digime, having already been an angel?
Yeah, well, you'd think that, of course, you'd know much more about it and how to do it, but the reality is that's not true. Of course, you know what needs to be done in just the basic terms of presenting your business. You understand all of those things like EIS and the shareholder agreements and all of those. So, of course, that makes it so much easier in that respect. But the art of raising money for a business is, of course, being able to explain your business succinctly, clearly, the vision, being able to deal with the issues that come across. And you can be as experienced as you like, but if you're doing something new, which we're doing, being able to describe that succinctly, getting your message across is as difficult for an experienced person as it is for a young person, because it takes a lot of time often to nub down to the essence of what you're doing, to be able to demonstrate that it's going to have value, that there is going to be a market for it, and all of those things. So I've had my trials and tribulations. We're now just about closing a Series A on this business after quite a few years of getting it to this point. And it's taken its time, like it does for any entrepreneur. I would say that my experience obviously makes it a little bit easier for me to get to see people and to have access to sources, but it's predominantly the same whether you're 20-something or 50-something or anything in between. You have the same issues.
So then what mindset have you seen angels have towards entirely new markets like Digime? Are they quite sceptical of the completely different entrant, or are they excited and embracing generally?
It's all sorts. There are as many different flavors of angel investor as there are businesses. So, and I think it's important to know what your particular appetite is as an angel investor. So I tend to want to invest in myself in more sort of innovative things. I'm not a great fan of Me Too's. I'm not a great fan of very straightforward businesses. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but they don't excite me. And I feel as though you have to have a little bit of excitement in what you're doing at this end because of the effort you have to put in. But I know many angels who do invest and steer away from the things that excite me, and they'll invest in buildings and more classic retail and some things like that. So when I'm out there, it is, I very quickly point out, we're not going to be making or breaking even for another 2 to 3 years. We have got a revenue plan and we're doing things, but I very quickly highlight the key characteristics, because I know that if the person I'm talking to doesn't normally invest in my type of business, then it's neither going to be a good use of his time nor mine. And I think that's important when you are an angel, is to qualify very quickly as well. You don't want to be wasting the time of the entrepreneur, who's does after all have to make normally a lot of visits, if it's fairly quickly clear that their business model doesn't fit your particular sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. And you said then that you quite like complex businesses. Does that mean it's very hard for complex businesses to succinctly and easily describe their business in, say, kind of the 5-word test where you can state your core value in 5 words? Does that happen with complex business models and complex businesses?
Yes, it does. And if there's one thing that I get a little bit frustrated with on both sides, I suppose, of the equation, is always this desire that somebody can express everything about their business in X words, or they're the X of this, the Uber for this or the whatever, right? Now, usually people can, but to me, it's somewhat facile. However, you must be able to explain your business relatively straightforwardly. But if you look at some of the better successes I've had, it's not always, remember what I said earlier, it's about the team. So I was one of the earliest investors in Datasift, not the earliest, which was another chap. But we came in fairly early. But when we came in, it was a business called Favorite. And then it became TweetMeme, and then it became MediaSift, and then Datasift. Now, the underlying technology was the same and ended up being used in different areas until it found an absolute fit. But it was Nick Halstead and his team, but primarily Nick, who we were really investing in. Therefore, could he have said in 3 words what he was doing, or 5 words? Yes, he could, but that wasn't what he ended up doing. So, as I say, it's about that wider vision that you're looking in, and you're saying, is the team there, but is the idea, does it have the kernel, and whether that's the one thing you're investing in, or you're saying, yep, you've got a good basic idea and it might be applied in several different ways, and you're the right team to do that. You see, it's so much more than 5 words. But at the same time, I will accept the fact you have to attract someone's attention and make them want to dig deeper. And therefore, if you can't be succinct, you won't do that. So it's a bit of yes, but a bit of no.
And then talking of your past investments, I have to ask, I'm a big fan of this company and use them frequently. You were a seed investor in Hailo back in 2011. So how did that come about? What stage was the business at, and what got you excited about the offering?
Well, Hailo, of course, breaks all the rules, my investment in Hailo, if you have any sort of set of rules, other than investing in the team. My due diligence on Hailo consisted of a 40-minute phone call with the CEO, Jay, and a 30-minute meeting with his exec team at Costa Coffee in Waterloo. And then I invested at what was really a crazy high valuation off plan. They had done nothing other than had the idea in a PowerPoint. And I was their very first investor. So you would think, wow, you are crazy. However, I had looked at 4 previous taxi-related businesses, and none of them could answer some of the simple questions I had about how are you going to break a dual-sided market and things like that. And during that first 40-minute call when Jay rang me up, and he knew me because we'd met each other and quite liked each other, and he was at eCourier at the time, which is the company he'd set up. And I did say to him, if he ever did anything, give me a call, and he did. But Jay answered all of those questions in that 40-minute call, and confidently, precisely. And sometimes you have to go with your gut. I mean, as I say, I'm an engineer, and I'm a believer that intuition does matter. Intuition is, to me, the result of a lot of thinking in the back of your brain, if you like. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that actually Jay had the previous experience. He understood some of the technological issues of dealing with communicating in real time with moving vehicles, and that's not as straightforward as it seems, as they swap from network to network and things. So I knew he had the technological underpinning, and in asking him about the marketplace, as I said, he was confident, he'd thought through the problems, he had some taxi drivers on his team, he had everything that was needed. So that's why I did it. But yes, literally 40-minute call and a 30-minute meeting, and then I said yes. So a very good investment, didn't really follow all the rules.
And Hailo, obviously, you've raised numerous rounds since then, and significant funds have been raised. As an angel, do you actively get involved in those later rounds, and do you advise Jay with those later rounds?
Not really. Jay has spoken to me a few times before, and he's now left and starting another company. Now I'm sure he will do very well with that. So I did speak with Jay for about the first 18 months or so, 2 years. But after that, the business was much bigger investors anyway. And so I'm now a sort of quiescent angel, watching the business as it grows and gets on with things. So, and I think you have to accept that as an angel. You know, you're an early investor and you'll start, but as you bring in VCs and bigger funds, then you will step away. And so, for example, in Datasift, which I mentioned earlier, I was the investor director there as we got VC funds. But as soon as we got the VC funds, I resigned. And whilst I'm still the liaison with the other angel investors, and so therefore, you know, deal with the board from time to time, I really have no input at all on their strategy or anything else. And I think that's just something you have to accept as an angel. You know, you've invested in something that has grown thanks to your early funds, but it has other people to advise and to do things.
Now, speaking of, Hailo, huge success, I'd love to shift to the other end of the scale now and ask about a war story and maybe how something didn't go quite so well, why it didn't, and how your strategy changed as a result.
Well, yeah, no, I've got quite a few war stories, and anybody who's done lots of investments will have them. So some interesting ones. I think one of the more interesting ones was when I was approached to invest in a business that was effectively merging with another business, and the funds that I and some others would invest would be the catalyst to make that happen. And it was a company dealing with water, I won't go more than that, but internationally, and then somebody doing a similar thing nationally, and bringing the two together would make it work. And when you looked at it, both companies had very good management teams, and so it all looked very good. But of course, it did fail after 2.5 years, which were quite hard work, really. And it failed primarily because there never really was a clear enough strategy for the two teams coming together and how that would work. And there were inevitable conflicts and things like that. And so whereas from the outside initially, the teams looked strong, they were strong individually, but not combined. And that did make me think a lot more as I went forwards after that about the type of people I was investing, not just were they competent, but are they the type of people that can bring people in and deal with, issues that may arise and stuff like that? Do they have that robustness? Now, for me, I have never liked people that shout and scream or are rude. And I suppose that flows through into sort of a style I like to look at for management, where I think that people are competent and able to handle conflict without falling off the plots and things like that. And having made that decision that that's something I'm looking for as part of the team dynamic, I certainly changed, and I've some of the thesis of my investment and turned some down. And I've actually seen that it worked. I've seen another one that's gone on, hasn't been a huge success, but was a success. And the team had to deal with some issues in that area, and they handled it as I would have hoped they would have handled it. So, yes, it was a relatively big investment, and it failed, but I learned from it. Mm-hmm. Another one of my failures was getting, unfortunately, a bit early on, seduced by the technology. And indeed, the team looked very good, and the previous set of angel investors seemed to have all the skills to help the team. But the reality there was that they didn't really have enough of a handle on the marketing. It was about building this really very novel unmanned air vehicle, which is kind of, think of it like a pudding bowl turned upside down and the rotor on top. And I told you earlier on, I'm an aeronautical engineer, but it's very difficult, but it flies by a thing called the Coanda effect. But it basically overcomes a lot of the problems you have with an urban UAV, because the cushion of air means that if it goes towards a building, it naturally gets pushed away. It doesn't cause an impact problem with rotors and stuff. And it's an inordinately stable platform for cameras and things, and was technologically very, very good. But they weren't good enough at the marketing of it. Now, it was early days for UAVs anyway, so I might have been guilty of investing too early. But the reason it failed was the marketing side of it. And that was one where I was sort of seduced too much by the technology. You can tell I still like it from the way I described it.
This is the love.
It is the love of it.
And if it's okay with you, we're going to move into a quick fire round now.
Yeah, sure.
So what's the key characteristic of a great investor?
The ability to listen to what an entrepreneur is saying and ask the critical questions.
If you could give angels one piece of advice, what would it be?
Take it slowly as you start. In other words, don't jump in with 2 feet. Join with an angel group and or any other sort of thing where you're investing with others, and invest small amounts and be consistent in that for at least a year and learn the trade, learn what you like and stuff like that. So start small, start slow, and build up slowly.
What's your favourite blog or newsletter?
In the investment world, it would be AVC, which is...
Brad Wilson.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. The founder you most respect or admire?
Oh, that's difficult because I probably respect and admire engineers more, if you like. So I wouldn't necessarily say I've got a particular founder, but there are many people in my lifetime of engineering that I admire. So Burt Rutan, for example, who introduced scaled composites and eventually did the Spaceship One, which Richard Branson's now using as the model, the Spaceship to Virgin Galactic, I'm a Virgin Galactic future astronaut. So it's that type of person, Burt Rutan, who can completely upturn a whole industry with the novelty of his thinking and makes a business of it. So there's a few of those.
And then the next 5 years for you and for Digime?
Yes, well, the next 5 years is fascinating. There is going to be a fundamental shift. We've seen in computing all sorts of shift from mainframes and client servers and the PC and now SaaS and everything else. And what we're seeing is a shift in the control of data. So personal data will return to the individual, and which will cure some of the privacy issues we have, but much, much more importantly, it will create a huge stem of innovation in health and all sorts of other areas, because if I take you back to, way the 80s, with SAP doing stuff for businesses and bringing all their data together, and that's now trillions of dollars, we're going to see the same happen with personal data, and it's fascinating being at the beginning of that. I'd like to say that Digime has one of the best chances of making a big change in that. Time will tell. But it's a huge change that's coming, and people should watch out for it. It's the personal data economy, and it is going to be massive.
Well, Julian, thank you so much for giving up your time today to be on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear your thoughts.
That's a pleasure. Nice to have spoken to you.
And I would like to say again a huge thank you to Julian for giving up his time today to come onto the show. And if you're loving Angel Insights, then subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or head over to the site at www.syndicateroom.com. And we'd also like to remind you that early stage investing is risky, so please ensure that you do the proper due diligence prior to making the investments. And have a wonderful Christmas. Thank you so much, as always, for your fantastic support. And we look forward to bringing you our episode with Alexandra Cavello at Angels Cube next Wednesday after Christmas.